The room fell silent as the 78-year-old woman entered the SWAT training facility. Laughter erupted seconds later. "Grandma's lost her way to bingo," someone shouted. Margaret Wilson stood calmly, clutching her application papers. Little did they know she was about to change everything with a single perfect shot. Before you watch full story, comment down your country name. I would love to hear from you. Also subscribe the channel. The annual SWAT qualification test was in full swing at the Riverside Police Department's training facility. 20 young men in tactical gear stood in formation as Captain Blackwood paced in front of them, his booming voice lecturing about precision, discipline, and elite standards. "Only the best of the best make it into this unit," Blackwood declared, his chest puffed out proudly. "Today we'll separate the—" He stopped mid-sentence. The recruits, noticing his sudden silence, turned to see what had caught his attention. Standing at the entrance of the training yard was a 78-year-old woman. Margaret Wilson stood barely 5 feet tall, her back slightly hunched with age, wisps of white hair escaping from her bun. She wore simple slacks and a button-up blouse, completely out of place among the tactical gear and weaponry. In her gnarled hands she clutched a folder of papers. Laughter erupted immediately. Several recruits doubled over, pointing at the elderly woman who had somehow wandered into their elite training session. "Check it out. Grandma's here to show us how it's done," one young officer called out, triggering more howls of laughter. "Did the nursing home trip get lost?" another shouted. "Someone call her caretaker before she hurts herself." Margaret remained perfectly still, her faded blue eyes calmly taking in the scene as the mockery continued. Captain Blackwood's initial shock turned to anger. He marched toward Margaret, towering over her small frame. "Ma'am," he said loudly as if she were deaf, "this is a restricted area. SWAT training is in progress. You need to leave immediately." Margaret looked up at him without a hint of intimidation. "I'm here for the qualification test," she said, her voice surprisingly strong and clear. "I have all the necessary paperwork." The laughter grew even louder. Someone in the back made creaking noises like an old rocking chair. "Is this some kind of joke?" Blackwood demanded, his face reddening. "Did Harrison from Vice put you up to this? Because it's not funny." "No joke, Captain," Margaret replied, opening her folder. "I have authorization from Commissioner Davis himself. I'm here to participate." Blackwood snatched the papers from her hands, his eyes widening as he read. The official department seal was clearly visible, along with the commissioner's signature. "This has to be a forgery," he muttered, but the documents looked legitimate. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Commissioner? Blackwood here. There's an elderly woman at my training facility claiming you authorized her to participate in SWAT qualification." His confident smirk faded as he listened to the response. "But sir, she must be at least 75. He was cut off again. "Yes, sir." "Understood, sir." Blackwood hung up, his face now pale with shock and anger. He turned to the still snickering recruits. "Apparently," he announced, his voice tight with restraint, "Mrs. Wilson will be joining today's qualification process." The laughter died down, replaced by confused murmurs. "Is this for real? They're letting a senior citizen try out for SWAT? This has to be some kind of PR stunt." Blackwood handed the papers back to Margaret with barely concealed contempt. "The locker room is that way. Training gear is in the cabinet. Try not to break a hip getting changed." Margaret took her papers back calmly. "Thank you, Captain. I'll be ready in 5 minutes." As she walked away, the whispers and snickering resumed. Blackwood turned to his second-in-command. "Make sure the medics are on standby. This is a disaster waiting to happen." When Margaret emerged from the locker room in standard-issue training clothes, she looked even more out of place. The uniform hung loosely on her thin frame, and she'd had to roll up the sleeves and pant legs several times. "All right, everyone," Blackwood announced, barely containing his irritation. "First test is the obstacle course. Standard time requirements apply to all participants." He emphasized the last part while looking directly at Margaret. The obstacle course was brutal, designed to test strength, agility, and endurance. It included a 6-foot wall climb, monkey bars, crawling under barbed wire, and a rope climb. "Wilson, you're up first," Blackwood said with a smirk. "Since you have special authorization, you can show us how it's done." More snickering from the recruits as Margaret approached the starting line. She took a deep breath, adjusted her training clothes one more time, and waited for the signal. "Begin," Blackwood shouted, starting his stopwatch with a dramatic flourish. What happened next silenced every person at the training facility. Margaret moved toward the wall with surprising speed. Instead of struggling with the climbing rope, she used the corner post and scaled the wall with perfect technique, swinging her leg over the top with practiced ease. She traversed the monkey bars quickly, her thin arms displaying unexpected strength. When she reached the barbed wire section, she dropped to the ground and moved through it with efficient, fluid movements. The rope climb, often the most challenging part, seemed almost easy for her as she ascended and rang the bell at the top before sliding back down. Blackwood stared at his stopwatch in disbelief. Margaret had completed the course in a time that would qualify for any SWAT team in the country. The recruits stood in stunned silence as Margaret walked back to the starting line, breathing hard but otherwise showing no signs of distress. "Beginner's luck," Blackwood muttered. "Let's see how she handles the physical fitness test." The next segment included push-ups, pull-ups, and a 2-mile run. Again, Margaret performed at a level that defied her apparent age. While she wasn't the fastest or strongest, she completed each element well within qualification standards. By lunchtime, the jokes had stopped entirely. The recruits now watched Margaret with a mixture of confusion, respect, and suspicion. This was no ordinary 78-year-old woman. "The tactical course is after lunch," Blackwood announced, his earlier confidence now tinged with uncertainty. "This is where we separate true SWAT material from the wannabes." As the group dispersed for a meal break, one of the younger recruits, Officer Jenkins, approached Margaret. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, "if you don't mind me asking, how are you doing this?" Margaret looked at him with a slight smile. "Age is just a number, young man. It's experience that counts." The tactical course was the most challenging part of the qualification. A mock building with multiple rooms where recruits had to identify threats, distinguish between hostages and attackers, and demonstrate proper clearing techniques. Before Margaret's turn, Blackwood pulled aside the training officer. "Give her the modified weapon," he said quietly. "The one with the heavier trigger pull. Let's see how she handles a real challenge." When Margaret's turn came, she was handed the modified weapon. If she noticed the difference, she didn't show it. She entered the course and moved through it with practiced precision, taking perfect positions at corners, identifying all threats correctly, and making split-second decisions with uncanny accuracy. Her shooting, even with the modified weapon, was flawless, center mass or headshots for every target with no hits on non-threat targets. By the time she completed the course, word had spread throughout the department. Officers from other units gathered to watch as the final test approached, the shooting qualification course. "Standard course," Blackwood announced, his voice now lacking its earlier confidence. "But today we're adding a stress element. You'll be shooting after physical exertion to simulate real-world conditions." He ordered each recruit to do 30 jumping jacks before stepping up to the firing line, another deviation from standard protocol, clearly designed to challenge Margaret. When her turn came, Margaret completed the jumping jacks without complaint, then took her position at the firing line. The range officer handed her the department-issue pistol. 10 rounds at the 7-yard target, 10 at the 15-yard target, and 5 at the 25-yard target, he instructed. "You need 80% to pass." Margaret nodded, checked the weapon with practiced ease, and assumed a perfect stance. "Begin." Her first shots hit the center of the target in a tight grouping that would make professional marksmen envious. As she moved to the farther targets, her accuracy never wavered. For the 25-yard target, the most challenging, she took slightly more time between shots, each one hitting precisely where she aimed. When she finished, the range fell completely silent. Margaret had scored 100%, the only perfect score of the day. Blackwood looked like he might explode. "Check those targets again," he ordered. "Perfect score, sir," the range officer confirmed. "Best shooting I've seen in years." By now, a crowd had gathered, including Commissioner Davis himself, who had come to see firsthand what was happening at his SWAT qualification. "Captain Blackwood," the commissioner called out. "A word, please." As Blackwood reluctantly joined him, one of the recruits, Officer Jenkins again, approached Margaret. "Ma'am, that was incredible. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Margaret smiled. 40 years with the CIA's Special Activities Division. Before that, military intelligence. Whispers spread through the group as the commissioner returned with a subdued-looking Blackwood. "Recruits," Commissioner Davis announced, "allow me to properly introduce Margaret Wilson. Before her retirement, she was one of the most decorated covert operatives in CIA history, with experience in over 30 countries. Mrs. Wilson has graciously agreed to help establish a new training methodology for our department." Blackwood looked as though he had swallowed something bitter. "But sir, her age is precisely the point," the commissioner cut in. Today was a test, not just of Mrs. Wilson's abilities, which are beyond question, but of our department's values. How we treat people we underestimate says everything about our character. He looked around at the now embarrassed recruits. The future of effective policing isn't just about physical strength, it's about judgment, experience, and respect. Today I saw far too little of those qualities in this group. Margaret stepped forward. SWAT teams fail when they rely solely on youth and brawn. The most dangerous threats require intelligence, patience, and wisdom, qualities that often improve with age. Her clear blue eyes swept across the group. Some of you showed potential today, not just in your performance but in your willingness to learn. Others demonstrated why they shouldn't be trusted with the responsibility that comes with this job. 6 months later, Margaret supervised a new group of SWAT candidates, a diverse mix of men and women ranging from 25 to 52 years old. Captain Blackwood had been reassigned to administrative duties, and the department had implemented new qualification standards that emphasized tactical thinking and judgment alongside physical abilities. Among the candidates was 49-year-old Officer Patel, a veteran beat cop who had never considered SWAT an option until Margaret's story changed the department's culture. "They said I was too old to start SWAT training," Patel had told Margaret during his application. "Let them underestimate you," Margaret had replied with a knowing smile. "That's when you'll surprise them most." As the candidates prepared for their first test, Margaret caught Officer Patel's eye and gave him a slight nod. The most powerful weapon in anyone's arsenal wasn't a gun or physical strength, it was being underestimated, then proving everyone wrong. That evening, Margaret sat in her office reviewing performance notes. There was a knock at the door and Commissioner Davis entered. "How's the new approach working out?" he asked. "Very well," Margaret replied. "Last month's hostage situation was resolved without a single shot fired. The team used negotiation first, force as a last resort." The commissioner nodded approvingly. "Exactly what we hoped for. Any regrets about coming out of retirement?" Margaret thought about the faces of the officers she was training, about those who might never have had a chance under the old system. "Not one," she said with a smile. "Some of us do our best work when everyone expects us to be sitting in a rocking chair." After he left, Margaret opened her desk drawer and took out a faded photograph of herself 40 years younger, standing with her CIA team in a foreign country she couldn't name even now. Next to it was a new photo of her current trainees, diverse in age, gender, and background. She placed the photos side by side. The faces were different, but the purpose remained the same: to serve with excellence regardless of what others thought you capable of. At 78, Margaret Wilson wasn't just teaching tactical skills, she was changing the entire understanding of what it meant to be qualified for the job. And it had all started with that moment she walked through the door, endured their laughter, and then stunned them all with what an old woman could really do.